All right, welcome to our panel discussion on the Greenville Community Summit on crime and safety. This is our fourth of 5 panels that we're doing for 1 solid hour on the hottest topics and most important issues in our community. And again, thanks to the Greenville Chamber of Commerce for having us here today at the Greenville Expo. We've had a great turnout here today, and of course we've had a lively discussion on issues so far: the economy, national health care leader that Greenville is, the bond referendum, and now we're going to focus on crime and safety in our community. And I hope we're going to share some good news with you, but certainly some important news, so we're glad you're with us for this. Again, a special thanks to all of our sponsors today: Delcor, Carolina Ice Company, Greenville Utilities, Greenville Toyota, Pitt Community College, and Yadkin Bank, or our community-minded sponsors that have put their resources into helping bring you the Greenville Community Summit that will be played back on radio and television. Of course, we are taping here on Wednesday, April 8th at the Greenville Expo. Let me introduce you to our panel for this discussion. To my far right is our friend Rose Glover, who is a longtime District 2 representative for the Greenville City Council. Rose, thank you for being here. Next to her is our interim police chief, Ted Sauls, who is serving as the police chief now after the departure of Hassan Aden last year, or was it earlier this year? It was earlier this year. To my immediate left is our district attorney in Pitt County, my friend Kimberly Robb. Kimberly, thank you for being here. And to her left is someone she spends a lot of time working with, the sheriff of Pitt County, Neil Elks. Again, the format will be as we have in the other hours. We're going to allow our panelists to give a couple of minutes of their thoughts on crime and safety in our community, and then we'll throw out some questions. And then we'll leave some time at the end if you have questions that you'd like to ask. We have a crowd mic here. We would love for you to participate as well. So let's get this one rolling with Rose Glover, who represents the city of Greenville on the Greenville City Council in District 2. Rose, aren't you glad I didn't make you do the bond committee discussion?
Oh, God, yes. I'm so glad.
It's great to have you here, and I know that you've been concerned about crime in Greenville for a long time and had a lot to do with some of the things that we've done that have helped in that regard. So I'd love to hear your comments.
Okay. I actually got on the city council because we were having so many.
Pull that up a little closer.
I actually made my decision after many people asked me to run for city council. After we had a streak of murders, like 5 murders in a month, and that was way back. But I felt like I could be more of a help to our citizens than and just not take my being able to retire, but to do something that would help the people and also help me and keep me young. So, but I have been serving on the city council for 15 years. This is my 15th year. And we've had a lot of changes. We've had a lot of council members change. We've had a lot of everything since I've been on the council. But as Henry said, that my main concern has always been the safety of our citizens all over the city, and policing and making sure that our rescue response times were good, and we could keep the crime down by working with the police department. And let me say, we do have a good relationship, the council does, with the Greenville Police Department. I'm sorry to see Chief Aden go away because he had done some great things, but when you're really smart, you know, sooner or later somebody's going to pick you up after you go to all these police chief meetings. Somebody's going to pick you up and want to take you away. So crime is looking good. We're down, and Chief Sauls is probably going to be able to tell you all about that. But the perception of crime is up, and that stays up. The perception that there is always going to be, and we're always going to have crime as long as the city is living. But the thing about it is that we can do better by working together, working with our citizens, working with their communities, and working with everyone. And Reuben Greenberg is one of my favorite police chiefs, retired police chief. He wrote a book. And in his book, he talked about the broken window theory. And when you go into the community and the community is all boarded up and there's a lot of broken windows and the community looks like nobody cares, that's what drug dealers and people who want to commit crime, that is where they normally reside, is because they feel like nobody cares about that community, so police help is going to be less and they can commit more crime. But the thing about it is that they've already stolen everything from the people in the poor communities, so now they're working on the affluent communities and where they can get big things that they can sell. So we have to cut the demand for, we can cut the demands for drugs that are being brought into our community. Our police officers are having to give people reaction shots to a drug, and Ted Sauls will talk to you about it. But as we go on, I think it's better that we, as a city, that we use like your media and whatever we can to keep people informed and not try to make sure that they're not afraid. But I think you're always afraid of what you don't know. But you always hear that there's crime going on all over the city all the time. There's murders, there's this, there's that. But a city is only as good as its least of its communities. So as we have tried to revitalize West Greenville, the police have a substation in West Greenville where they can go in and do their notes or write up things that they've done versus having to sit in their cars and do it. They can come over there, and there is a police presence in the community when they come there. We just opened our second one. Is it second one? We just opened our second one on 10th Street, which is good in that area where they've had a lot of crimes in that area. So we're working together because if we can weed out the bad and seed in something good, that's why I want more home ownership. When you have a community that's 80% rental, then you're gonna have problems. And so the university community, they're seeing the problems that West Greenville has always seen, but I feel like you need to talk with the landlords and whoever's renting the property, like I do in my community. I wanna know, what are you going to do about this broken window? You're going to come and fix this window, or you're going to just let it sit there? But the landlords have to play their part as well. They have a very, very big part in our communities, but they have less interaction with our police department and with the city council.
Okay, very good. Let's get Ted's comments. Ted Sauls is the interim police chief. And doing a great job. I mean, we're very fortunate to have Ted in Greenville. He's a long time with the Greenville Police Department. Stepped right in as the interim chief when Hassan Aiden left earlier this year. And Ted and I just had breakfast the other day, and you were giving me some good news. And I think people want to hear good news from the police. So tell us your perspective of how we're doing right now as a community.
Well, first of all, Henry, thank you so much for having us. And thank you to everybody who's in attendance and everybody who can hear us or will watch this later. It is always refreshing when I look out and I see people who are actually interacting with us and bringing us information as well, because that's what we thrive off of. We have to have it. Chief Aiden left us about mid-January, and we're in our search now for our new chief. So if you're interested in how that's going, we closed the search Friday of this week. And then I'm thinking a couple of months of looking at resumes and things of that nature, which we don't do that. That's done for us. I'm hoping we'll have our new chief in place by about August. So stay tuned for that, and we'll keep rolling just like we're going now. Some of the information Henry and I discussed earlier this week regarding our crime rate and how things are going, we are really enjoying a low lull right now. And I think it's always important that we capitalize on that and we talk to citizens about that. Because what's going to happen next if we're low now? What's left to happen? We're going to go back up. There are going to be peaks and valleys. I need the support for our officers and for our department during those peaks, just like we have during our valleys. We finished up 2014 at about 6% reduction overall, which is phenomenal in my opinion. We set a goal for ourselves of 3 and we made 6, so I was extremely happy about that. Currently this year, we're still 4.25% down in our violent crimes, our serious stuff. We call them Part 1 crimes. And overall, we're 17.75% down from January the 1st to today. We have seen that big of a reduction. We like those opportunities because it gives us a chance to do more interacting with you, to attend more events and to address the quality of life issues that mean the most to you. That does not mean the crime is not gone away, though. We are, as Ms. Glover said, having a significant issue right now with the impact of heroin on our neighborhood, on our community. Our officers are issued Narcan. That's you probably saw our press conference on that. That's not a new product. The fire department's had that product since the 90s, and they've been saving lives with it ever since then. But we as police officers, we didn't see the value of that. It was actually through a relationship with the sheriff where we come to understand that, hey, we may need to look at this product. We had a bad batch come through. Well, you say, what's a bad batch? Isn't all heroin bad? Well, yes, it is, but we had a batch that was actually causing people to go into comatose and or near-death states, and we were able to save many through the use of that product, and I think we've only lost to date that we know of one, Henry.
Wow.
So those numbers are where we are. I will be glad to answer any specifics you have on those later, but I just want to finish by telling you that your staff at the police department they're committed to you. Most of them, myself, I'm on my 19th year. Captain Ivy's with me today. He's acting as our deputy chief right now. He's been with us over 20 years, and we plan on finishing our careers here. So we're here for you. We're here to stay. We will take in our new chief, and he or she will be up here in front of you next, and we'll be supporting them. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ted. And again, thank you for your service as interim police chief while Greenville looks for a new chief. To my left is my friend Kimberly Robb. Kimberly is the district attorney in Pitt County. She was with us a year ago when we did this summit, and we talked about a lot of different things, and it's good to have you back again. Pull that up a little bit.
All right.
Kimberly Robb, folks. Thank you, Kimberly, for being here.
And it's very nice to be here, and I appreciate the fact that all of you are here, and welcome your questions in a little bit. I can tell you that from my perspective, I've been with the DA's office for 23 years, and the relationships between our organizations, and I mean the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department, has never been better. And that's important because our office is beginning to get more proactive in cases and not reactive. And that's helpful because we're starting to figure out who the real problems are in our community, and we're going after them. We're going after them in a way that we've never done it before. And I think we're making an impact, but it's only working because of the collaboration between the three agencies. So that's all I have to say right now. I look forward to answering your questions.
And Sheriff Neil Elks is with us again. Sheriff Elks, serving his second term.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
As Sheriff of Pitt County. Neil, good to have you here.
Thank you.
What are you seeing in the county right now?
Well, thank you for having us today. We'd like to start out by thanking the audience and the spectators that are here today to come out and participate in this. This makes us feel good to know that you're interested in your community. Things that are on the outlook or that we're looking at are the same thing you hear in the city talk about. We all share the same problems. Is the big influence of heroin in our community. We started seeing it about 2 years ago. And it's a broad ban on everybody, young, old, all walks of life. It's something we're really going after. We're making a lot of heroin arrests. And our DA office is assisting us in prosecuting those and getting those guys sent off. But the sad thing about it is we all probably know somebody that's experiencing that heroin problem, and we all know that somebody's affected their life, and we probably know somebody that's lost their life about it. But we're experiencing a down in our crime rates. We're down about 12% last year. We were real tickled to death with that, and that's our Part 1 crimes, our violent crimes. So I think we're doing good, but I credit a lot of it to our participation from our community and the interaction of the agencies and the law enforcement agencies in Pitt County.
You know what's really interesting about the heroin thing is we're hearing, because you guys are dealing with it more and more, we're hearing more and more about it, is the fact that I've just come to the realization that heroin is a cheap drug.
It is.
And has it always been that way? I used to think that people migrated to heroin and it was an expensive drug. Has heroin come down in its value over the years?
I think it's become cheaper. It was a teaser between that and your pills. A lot of people that normally wouldn't get addicted to pills, or pills be a choice of their choosing, have got addicted to them through pain medications and different things. A lot of your doctors are quick to write a prescription. These people have a problem craving that opium, and they're having to figure out how to get it. And here you got somebody that says, hey, I can give it to you for $20 versus you paying $50 a pill. And then the increased daily dependence has gotten so large on that. You know, I heard a drug dealer say years ago that a bunch of these guys we arrested back in the 80s and 90s all went to prison for heroin. They were coming back, and they said they were going to open the heroin market up. And first thing I thought about was, we got meth, you got crack, and other things of choices. And they said, if we can get a person to try heroin one time, we'll have a customer for the rest of our life. And you saw that starting to come to realization. I thought it would never happen, but I had to go back and rethink that, and it is true. We have seen a big increase of heroin.
Wow. Let me stay on this end, then we'll come back down and talk to. Let me get to Kimberly. Kimberly, you prosecute crimes from all of these agencies, and a lot of times we hear that people go to a life of crime or start doing things that are criminal activity because of their economic status. The economy has gotten better in the last 5 to 6 years. Have you seen, and of course we just heard Ted say that crime is down in Greenville. I'm going to talk to him about some of those techniques in a minute. Have you seen, do you sense that crime is down? Is the economy playing any role in that, or is that just wishful thinking?
I think it's just wishful thinking. We're not seeing a decrease in our caseload. Matter of fact, we are the third most understaffed office in the entire state. Our workload formula is such that we are grossly understaffed. So we're working harder because they're bringing us cases and we just have fewer people to deal with it. I do not necessarily agree with you about the economics. I think it has a lot to do with the family structure. I think a lot of the people that come into our system are people that are raised in one-parent households, and I would honestly say I think that's a big part of the problem.
Back to Ted. Ted, you gave us some good news about the crime statistics, the Part 1 crimes being down 6% last year. Talk about some of the new techniques that are being used. You told me about this the other day. I know that Chief Aiden brought some new ideas to the table. We had focused deterrence a year ago, which we actually spent a lot of time talking about on this summit last year, this summit panel. Focused deterrence. We're 1 year into that strategy. How has that worked? And you might want to explain to people what focused deterrence is if they've never heard of it before, number one. And then number two, some of the other things that that have really been interesting to me that you guys have done in using geo-mapping that I think really would be surprising to folks. So talk about those two things, if you would.
Absolutely. The first thing I like to always say, and I said it to you this week when we talked, we get our work done through the men and women that are out there on the street. They're the ones that need the support. They're the ones that need the community support as much, if not more, than I do, because they are truly working hard for you each and every day. The programs that we put in place would not work without them, but the programs are pretty ingenious. Let's talk about focused deterrence first. We had this program kicking off last year during this summit, and we called in 8 very violent offenders. When I say call them in, we chose individuals who met a certain requirement, they had a certain criminal history, and they were on probation, because we have to have a way to compel them to come in. That's the probation piece. It's part of their probation. Not that it's our avenue to get to them. We had 8 individuals come in. We sat on a panel, Ms. Robb, the sheriff, myself, the U.S. attorney, the DEA, the ATF, all of the alphabet soup, as I like to call them, was on that panel. In other words, every agency let these people know we're watching the 8 of you closely. If you mess up, we're going to bring the stiffest penalties we can. Madam DA, if she can't get it through the state, then we'll go with you through the federal system. And we're all going to work together on it to make sure you get the stiffest penalty possible. Well, we always say, and it's kind of that little corny saying of, if we can just save one, we've said that, right? If we can just save one kid, if we can just save one person, if we can just get one person off of heroin. Well, out of those 8 so far, we have saved 1. And it is a success story that I never thought I would bring back to you, and I'll be completely honest. Because the gentleman who has not reoffended and is still holding a job was one of the people that I'd grown up in my law enforcement career with as a career criminal who was not going to change. In addition to letting them know what offenses will land them in jail or prison, we offer resources to them. We have all the community partners there. We open doors for them on getting jobs, on interviewing, on how to dress, how to act, talk, think, how to hold down a steady job. And then when the call-in is over, we actually give them those resources. It's a matter of whether or not they want to take us up on it. So we had that one success story. This year we called in 12. And as of yet, we've not had a person reoffend that are on that list. So we had to call in about a month ago, and we've not had a reoffense that I'm aware of. So I would say we've already started off on the right note with those guys.
So you basically say to these guys, we know what you're doing, we know that you're what kind of crimes you're committing, and we're coming down on you with all the force we can bring. But if you'll turn your life around and use these resources, we'll work with you to change your life.
Not only will we work with you, we'll be there to help provide the resources.
Right. And that's worked in at least one case, 1 out of the 8. So that's good. And are the other ones still in transition? Or are you hopeful that some of them will come around? Or
On that first phase of the 8, we've had the 1 success story. We have 1 who's in transition, and Madam D, I think we have 6 that are in prison. So
oh, wow. Six didn't believe it, huh?
Well, the key to that too, though, Henry, is we have to
slam the door on them.
We have to keep our promise. So if we tell you we're going to do something, we have to keep it on both ways. If I tell you I'm going to help you and you come for help, I have to help.
Well, that should help you with your next wave of people you bring in.
One would hope.
Yeah, exactly. We'll come back to the GeoMap, and let me get Rose in here to talk about it. Rose, what's your sense of crime in Greenville? You said you'd been on the council 15 years and you got involved in city work because of crime. Are we on the right track?
Absolutely, I think we're on the right track. I think we're doing probably good as any other city in North Carolina. Actually, Rocky Mount and Wilson pushes they keep our numbers down with the crime that they're having there. You look at small cities like that, they're having a problem with crime as well. So what we have to do is, the chief keeps us up with our crime stats and what's going on if there's a murder. The council required that we get a call and not an email that there is a murder, and so we know right away before it even hit the news. And that helps us too, because they can give us information that they haven't let out yet to let us know how this worked and what happened. Like you said, we have to work together, and we have to make sure that our communities are kept up. And one good thing that's happening, Henry, that will probably deter a lot of crime is that State Employees Credit Union is putting $50 million in West Greenville to rehab homes for sale or for rent or to rent to own. So, $50 million goes a long way when you can rebuild, and we've gone through, which was a great thing, and we just really, really think one of our code enforcement officers, Carlton Dawson, who when the Raleigh Office of Code Enforcement was called, they said, well, you have our past president of the North Carolina Housing Code. You need to talk with Carlton Dawson. So we tried to get this at one time when we found out that banks were actually, this is money that banks have like overcharged people and, and things like that. So now that we're able, and they've been very successful in other cities, you cannot expect crime to be great in a community. As I always try to drive home to people, is that if you don't care about your community, anyone is going to come in there and take over. And that's what happens. Our police chief, they say, I have to call them about boarded up houses all the time because they take the board off and go in the house and use drugs and do all other things. So there has to be a really, really good relationship between the council and the police department. Ted and Ivy, they come and sit in my den and we talk about the problems that we have in our communities. So we have to have that ongoing, and I'm very glad that our crime stats are down, and pray that they won't go, up, any more than what we were last year. And so I think the police department is doing an excellent job in trying to deter crime, and that's where the focus deterrent come in. It's a really, really good thing. And then you involve the neighborhood that this kid is trying to go on the straight and narrow, and give the neighborhood the opportunity to help that person. And so that's a good thing that we can do in our communities.
Let me go back to Sheriff Elks down here. Sheriff, resources are always an issue. We talked about this some last year. You're dealing with more drugs now, heroin problem. How are we doing in terms of the commitment to law enforcement in this community, in your view?
Are you speaking about the funding?
Yeah, just how are you doing funding-wise? I mean, funding is an issue for everybody.
Well, we
right?
started feeling some relief this budget year from the commissioners. We were granted a lot of things we've been denied. I think this year is going to be the challenge whether or not we're going to get open a new jail up this year. We put it off for the last 3 years. I really think it's a necessity that we open the jail this year. Just the opening part of that, the staffing is going to cost around estimated $750,000 to staff it. The jail is already in place. It's just a matter of staffing it. It's already fully equipped. The kitchen is designed to handle what we have. But at the same time, the jail is important as well. We need to be able to make sure we have a place to house our violent offenders. And 90% of the offenders in jail are violent offenders. We've found ways to get the misdemeanors out, and we find ways of getting people out on electronic monitoring. But overall, our funding has been better last year. We hope it's going to be better this year. We actually asking for additional staff this year. We've got a couple of problem areas. We want to get more into gathering of intelligence. We want to get more into gang gathering of intelligence and investigating and going after the more of the areas that we see in problems in. We see a lot of gangs sitting out there that until they stick the ugly head out, they kind of go unnoticed. So we want to go ahead and get ahead of that and do what we can to prevent those things.
And Kimberly, in terms of the district attorney's office, you mentioned the size of the workload that you guys are having to deal with, and there's been discussion at the legislature about what to do about this. You know, everybody's diving for dollars in Raleigh, but courts and prosecutors have also been at the table this year saying you've got to do more to help in terms of what the funding levels are for people like you're dealing with right here in the Pitt County DA's office. Yeah, talk about that if you would.
Well, we're hopeful that the state's going to recognize we have been sort of the stepchild, the redheaded stepchild in the system. The clerk's office is getting money, the magistrates are getting money. The DA's offices are always the last in line. And I've got kids who get hired at less than police officers, attorneys who are being hired after 7 years of school who make less starting than police officers because we don't have the funding. My funding comes 100% from the state of North Carolina. And they dictate how much I get per position. And that's all I get is position funds. So it's very, very important that they increase those funds. I can't keep the good people I have, and I have a great group of kids right now, a great, aggressive, super group of kids, and I can't keep them if they don't give me the funding to keep them, and that's very, very important.
You're talking about kids, you're talking about prosecutors.
I'm baby DAs is what I call them, because they're all younger than I am. But yeah, but they're
Those
just
folks
a
that
super.
prosecuting
super
probably
great.
don't feel like they're kids,
Yeah,
but I hear
well,
what you're saying.
I've got Clark, Everett, and Glenn, so that balances it out.
Well, Clark balances the age levels out. All right, we're going to get a break in, and we'll come back and get into more issues. And then at the end of this hour, as we have, we'll open up the microphone if anybody has any questions or comments. Again, we're taping, we're doing live on tape today here on April the 8th at the Greenville Expo, the 2015 Greenville Community Summit, which will be played back on 103.7 and on Cable 7 on the Suddenlink system. And so thank you for being with us, and we'll take a short break, and we will return with our discussion on crime and safety in the Greenville and Pitt County community right after this. Okay, welcome back. We are live on tape today at the Greenville Convention Center. Today is April the 8th, and we're taping as part of the expo here, our Greenville Community Summit. We appreciate all the participants and panelists that we've had today, and we're having a good discussion right now about crime and safety in our communities. And I want to throw the next, by the way, if you have a question or a comment, go ahead and move to the microphone and we'll come to you, but I won't know you've got one unless I see someone there. But I'm going to throw this back to Ted Sauls. Ted, one of the things you said that Chief Aiden brought to Greenville was geo-mapping, and that is where you guys actually look at hot spots around the city and go to where the crime is taking place and spend more time putting the police presence there. And that seems to be working, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So we always had a form of hotspot policing, but what Chief Aiden did, and I've made the comment many times, he was a brilliant criminologist. He understood the business. It had just a mastery of how to do this stuff. And he brought to us a a system of called CRIAs, Crime Response Initiative Areas. Basically, he laid a fishnet over the city, and every square was 750 feet by 750 feet. We overlaid crime that occurred in the past 3 years with crime that occurred in the past 6 months. So that gave you your historical view and your current view. Wherever those two intersected, they became our hotspots. But the beauty of it is they were micro hotspots. Within a 750 block, there may be one house, maybe two houses. So all we've got to do is figure out which house is causing the problem and eradicate the problem, and the hotspot goes away. So that's exactly how we attacked it. We gave it extra special attention, I like to say. Well, the neighborhoods that don't have problems, we let them know through education that you wouldn't see police as much because you didn't need that constant contact. We haven't forgot about you, and we're still going to ride through when we can, but that's where we focus our enforcement efforts, or on those micro hotspots.
Interesting. Sheriff, can that kind of thing work in the county? You have a lot more square mileage to cover. Do you employ any of that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, absolutely. But basically what we do what we call old-fashioned police work. We basically identify a problem. We call it a hot spot now. We've basically been on top of our crimes. If we have an armed robbery, we have a break-in, we deploy the proper amount of resources out there immediately. Just the other day, we had an armed robbery. Within 2 hours, we had the subjects arrested, property recovered. Guys broke in, tied the guy up, and robbed him. In the county, it's a little different because you can't blend and hide as fast as you can in the city. Fortunately, we have better witnesses sometimes because when people see a car speeding, they pay attention to it. In the city, it just blends so fast and so easy. So those guys really have a hard time maybe identifying the suspects as easy as we do. We really look after where the problems are, whether it be a break-in or whether it be four-wheelers riding in the community. We've always identified those areas, and we aggressively work on them. If we have an armed robbery, I put 10 detectives on it. We'll have it solved in a timely manner. And they always say I'm fast to call it a 24-hour deal, but I hold the pressure to them.
Again, we've got a great panel here talking about crime and safety. Let me go back to Kimberly Robb, our DA. Kimberly, last year at the summit, we talked about the problem with gangs in Pitt County, and we've got gangs in Pitt County. We used to say we had wannabe gangs in Greenville, but we have real, honest-to-God gangs in Greenville now, do we not? And where are we in terms of dealing with them, and what kind of issues are you seeing as a result of it?
We absolutely have gangs. We have a gang problem, and as do our surrounding communities. And what I would like to see done statewide, and I've asked this in Raleigh, is that we need some kind of system to track the gangs, because what we're seeing is bleeding from Pitt County to Wilson, Pitt County to Nash, Pitt County to Lenoir, and vice versa. So even though we're pushing our gangs out, they're coming back from the surrounding counties. And so we need some accountability from all the counties around us to make sure that we're addressing the problem. The focused deterrence has helped a lot with the gangs, because almost 100% of the people we call in are gang members, different gangs, different gang members. And while we're talking about it, I would encourage you all to come to the next focused deterrence meeting. It is very, very interesting if you're somebody like me who thinks crime is fascinating. It's a wonderful meeting. It's a very tense meeting. It's a little bit scary, but you'll really get a feel for what we're really doing, and I'd ask you to come.
We got someone at the mic, but what's your sense of focused deterrence, and since that's been employed in cities like Fayetteville, High Point, the crime rate has definitely gone down as a result of it. We just heard Ted talk about being down 6% in violent crime this year. How much of that do you attribute to the new concept of focused deterrence here?
I think what focused deterrence has done is it has focused my attention on the very, very, very dangerous people in this town and the people that I need to knock off. And with their help, we're doing it. And so it has made me understand more of exactly who's doing the crimes, what needs to happen to those people doing the crimes, and we're doing it. I think also, and I heard a story that one of his officers, somebody came to him and said, officer, and she said, what? And he said, what do I need to do? And he said, what do you mean? She said, what do I need to do to get off the list? I don't want to be on the list. And so the word's getting out that we're keeping track of these people, we're watching them, and even though they may not be on the focused deterrence, they might be on my focused deterrence. And so we're watching them.
I think that's awesome. I think it's an amazing thing to see. You know, a year ago we talked about this and hoping that it would bring the crime rate down in Greenville, and it appears that it is. All right, let's go to our audience mic. Sir, if you would state your name and give your comment or question.
Phil Bullock. My question also reflects back to last year's summit. We were having a problem with multiple DUI offenders, and among those multiple cases, we had many that had multiple delayed court appearances, some of them 15, 20 times. Has that lessened? How much has it improved? And what are we doing about it if it hasn't?
Kimberly?
Yeah, it is definitely improved. Our statistics are 100% better. We started the administrative traffic court, which has taken the bulk of the cases out. We started night court. We're dealing with the cases that don't need to be in the DWI courts, and so that when the cases are in district court, the judges have the ability to handle just DWIs, and they're doing it. And we've got some wonderful judges who are taking it seriously, who are moving the cases along. Like I said, I've got some great assistant DAs working for me right now who are really aggressive and doing an exceptional job.
Thank you for that question, Phil. If anybody else has a question, please feel free to go right up to the mic, and we'd love to have you participate. Let me go back to City Council person, Rose Glover. Rose, we're hearing all these things. We're talking about focused deterrence. We're talking about geo-mapping. You know, what do you sense as a city council person? Do you sense that that we're doing everything that we can in the city of Greenville right now to keep that crime rate down?
Yes, I do. With the amount of police officers we've had, we've been down on officers per capita per person for a long time. And what we needed to start looking at until we bring our officers up to, the number that we really need, we need to look at adding a couple of officers to each budget, new officers to each budget, because crime is not going to go away. So the more officers we have on the force, the more work we can get done. But as I see it now,
Chief Sauls was shaking his head. He agrees with you on that.
yes, because I looked at a lot of things, and retention of our good police officers has really been hard because we took the OPED out, and they've changed the retirement system, and so if you got another city that's the retirement system and OPED and all that's looking much better than ours, that's where they're going to go. They're going to go somewhere else, and I can understand, with the number of we should have 2.2, 2.5 officers per capita, and so with us being like 17.2% down, this is alarming to me because one thing we need to keep in mind is that government was created for safety of the people, and if we don't support our safety officers, police and fire, then we're not going to have the kind of safety that we can really feel good with, even though I feel good with where we are now.
Right.
But I would feel even better as we look at our budget, because the state requires that you do a one-year budget. You can only but we do two-year budgets. So when we get to that 2-year, all we have to do is tweak it.
Gotcha.
So we need to start looking at finding monies that we could hire more officers. If we hired 2 officers a year and brought it up to status, and if we happen to get some money from somewhere, when we had the Ferguson group, we had grants and all that, that allowed us to have more police officers, because you would hire the police officer. When the grant ran out, the federal government required that you keep the police officer.
We were talking about that last session. We were talking about the bond referendum.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that federal grant money is dried up now, and
Yes.
it doesn't exist, so I'm sure it's affecting policing as well. Let's go back to the crowd mic. We got an audience member that wants to make a comment. Sir, if you would, give us your name.
David Chester, and the question, several of them now since I've been waiting, but one for DA Robb and what's been doing locally with veterans courts, because it's a significant problem with crime. And I know the other is some comment on what you're doing with the youth. When we talk about gangs, from my own experience, and I'm retired now, but gangs are mostly ex-inmates and young men and women looking for identity. And when you let the inmates come back out of their training in prisons, they're the recruiters for your younger people coming up. So what are we doing in coordination with prison administration, of the people returning, the probation officers, and
Well-
working with the children in our community.
Good questions.
Let me address the Veterans Court first. We struggle to maintain even our drug treatment court, which we think is a wonderful program, but the funding continuously gets cut. So we have not been funded for a Veterans Court. If we were, we would welcome it and we would support it, just as we have our drug treatment court, because it works. I think they're probably going to areas like Jacksonville, some other place, Onslow County, probably sooner than they will here. But if it works, they'll come here and we'll welcome it. And with regard to the kids, the one thing I have noticed as we've been, I hate to say knocking off, but as we've been knocking off the gang leaders, I really thought that what we'd see would be the crime stop. But what I'm noticing is that there's a vacuum. And so we see a little bit more crime because they're fighting for position. Once we take off the top person, then they come in and the younger ones are fighting for position within the gangs. So I think you're exactly right. We've got to find a way to reach the younger people before they see that as an attractive option. And I'm open to suggestions if you have any ideas, and these guys probably know better than I how we can reach them, but I would think it'd be through the school system.
Is the ultimate deterrence today prison? Because you talked about, of the 8 people that were brought in the original focused deterrence group, 6 of them are in prison now. And you held good on your promise. You put them in prison.
We did.
So is what I hear you saying is that there's another wave right below them that wants to step up and be the gang leader, even though the boss went to prison?
Absolutely. I've learned
Wow.
that in the last 2 or 3 months. I've watched it happen myself.
No kidding.
Do I think prison is a deterrence? There's probably 2 sides to that. Yes, it's a deterrence in that they don't have their freedom, but there are gangs in the prisons. There are a lot of gangs in the prisons, and we recognize that and we know that, but at least they're not out hurting innocent people.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left. If anybody has a question, this would be the time to come. We're going to be moving on to our travel and our transportation and roads panel coming up and getting an update on that new superhighway that Farrell Blunt has promised will be coming to Greenville any minute now. We have the Vice Chairman of the Board of Transportation for North Carolina here that's going to speak to that in a few minutes. Let me go back to your microphone. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Janice Slay, and I just moved here from Florida. But before I moved here, I looked at the news a lot about what was going on in Greenville for the past year, and I've heard things, and people say it's everywhere, but it's really not. I don't know if you already addressed this drive-by shooting things that I've been reading a lot about in these areas here, and I thought, wow, what's going on? What happened to, Andy Griffin Mayberry, North Carolina, and, because that's kind of, the lawlessness. I was reading about the man that pulled into the apartment complex, and there was a dog running around, had been there all day playing with the children, and the dog was in his parking space, and he just pulled out his gun and shot the dog in the head and the shoulder. And I'm like, wow, man, what kind of mentality is that? Where does it come from? Is he just like somebody that kills pit bulls that don't fight, right? And he's just used to killing animals. But I mean, what gives him the brazenness, that he just feels like he can do that,
Right.
in middle of town?
Well, you hit an interesting point. Chief Sauls, we hear from other people, Greenville's got a crime problem. You just said crime's down at 6%. Is it because Greenville is the hub of Eastern North? We talked about this before. Greenville's the hub of Eastern North Carolina. If it happens in Greenville, it's going to, don't you leave, I want to recognize you. We got one of our sponsors here. I can't let him leave. But we got the TV stations here. They cover everything that happens in Greenville. But yet when we pulled up the crime statistics last year, we were looking at it, and per capita, Morehead City had a higher crime rate than Greenville does. So is there a misconception because every single thing that happens in Greenville, with all due respect to my TV friends, ends up on the TV screen?
I think so, 100%, Henry. We have perception is always an issue. We have seen a great reduction in our crime rates, but when everything that is going on is seen or written about, and I can't blame that on our media, that just means they're doing a good job and they're on top of things, but they are housed here. It's easy for them to cover Greenville and Pitt County, much easier than it is when they have to travel out to some of the outskirts and cover those areas. So you're going to see more about what happens in Greenville. Another thing to consider is Greenville has grown leaps and bounds when some of our other communities that I've often referred to as bedroom communities are not growing at that same rate. So people come here. If we have a 90,000 person population, it's not uncommon during the day for us to be 250, 300,000. And when Walmart was first built, they were seeing 70,000 people through their doors each day. When you have that kind of influx, whatever those people are bringing from their communities are coming into your community. So we have that issue that we have to face too. But you brought one interesting thing up, and I'll finish with this. I've been saying for a long time, this is not Mayberry anymore. We are working hard to educate our public on where the dangers are and what they look like, smell like, and feel like, and how you can keep yourself from becoming a victim, because most of the time it's very simple. And then my final comment would be something the sheriff said, and he's exactly right. No matter how much newfangled technology we've got and all this stuff we can do, it's still what we like to call boots on the ground. He called it good old-fashioned police work. We have to have relationships with you. Our community has to talk to us. That's where we're going to get our information from. When you get tired of crime, it will stop in your neighborhood.
Thank you all. Great discussion, and thanks for the great questions this session.
Can I
We're actually out of time,
Are
Rose.
we out of time?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I apologize. We got like 30 seconds,
Okay.
and I'm sorry, but I do appreciate all of you
Okay.
participating. I do have to thank Steve Jones, Yadkin Bank, the gentleman, the nice-looking gentleman in the Carolina blue coat, who is the vice chairman of the East Carolina Board of Trustees, is here. And Steve is the president of Yadkin Bank, one of our sponsors today. Steve, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. Let's give the panel a round of applause as well. Great job, Rose Glover, Ted Sauls, Kimberly Robb, and Sheriff Neil Elks. Thank you all. And Rose, now you have an invitation to come on my show and finish your comment. Yeah, so you can't tell me no.
Right, I can't tell you no, I gotta come.
All right, thanks to our staff also. We're going to take a short break, and we'll roll tape again here in a few minutes, and we're going to talk about roads and transportation right after this commercial break.